Welcome to Your Awakening, a collection of life stories told by heart-centered, passionate women on a mission to live our truth. We hope you gain peace and strength through each conversation, as together we will raise the vibration of the world, one journey at a time. Hey everyone, welcome back to another series of Your Awakening. I am so grateful to have Cory Strathman joining the conversation today. I want to point out that he is the first male that we've had on here, and I'm just so thrilled to open this conversation around mental health and depression. To give you guys a little background, Cory and I have known each other since high school, but the grace of social media, our paths crossed. We saw what each other was up to, and I was like, do you want to come on this series that I'm doing? So a little about Cory, so you guys know, he was a principal at a really young age of 28, now 34, has found himself unemployed, and came face to face with depression and alcohol abuse, and resigned from this job that you had, and are now leading the way with this mission called Grace in Your Corner, speaking up, one person, touching one life at a time. And it's just like, it touched my heart so much, and I'm so happy to open this conversation. Did I leave anything else out that you want to share?
No, I think you nailed it there, and I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah. All right. So I always like to dive in because this is all about our journeys, right? Like different times in our lives when we wake up, whether it's like frying pan to the head or 2x4, as I sometimes like to say. So let's talk about your childhood. How was it as a kid?
Yeah, I would like to think I had a perfect childhood. I was raised in a house with two loving parents. I was raised Catholic. We were at church on every Sunday. Anything that I needed was provided to me. Great role models, great friends. Childhood was memories I'll never forget, and there was really no hardships in childhood. Honestly, everything was the way you'd imagine it should be.
What did you dream about, like when you were a kid? Were you like, I want to be this when I grow up?
I think that it varied quite a bit. Of course, the typical young boy that wants to be a sports superstar. And then for a while there, I thought I'd be in the medical field, be a doctor. It just it was kind of the flavor of the month, really, as me for growing up.
It's a beautiful thing as a kid, right? We get to just like be this and then be that. And so then you like entered college, and I guess like, was there any peppering in of depression or moments where it was like, because I just want to quickly get into, now it's mental health. Like
Yeah.
your childhood was awesome, amazing.
Yeah.
Then you go off to college.
Yeah. So, I mean, there definitely was in college, but it was to the point where I didn't recognize it because I didn't know any better. I hadn't really faced any adversity in my life. I mean, throughout high school and going into college, was very successful academically, athletically, hadn't had to face a lot of adversity. I went to Baker University for a semester, played football there, nothing really of note. But now as I look back, when I transferred to Kansas State my freshman year, and for the rest of my career at Kansas State, there'd be a couple days here or there where I didn't feel normal. I felt fatigued. I felt like being away from everyone. And I would just lock myself in my room, tell my roommates that I was sick. But then I could just jump right back into things. I mean, there was hardly anything that was impactful in my life, and college there's not a ton of responsibility. So I jumped right back into things. But looking back from what I've gone through now, definitely some mental illness, some depression symptoms that started in college.
So you played football for a year, and then you transferred to, because Baker's a smaller school, for those
Yeah.
of you that might not know. It's, I don't know, like D3 or NAIA, like smaller.
NAIA, yeah.
Yeah. And so then you transfer to a like D1 huge campus.
Right.
now looking back, and because I know you, I mean, we are both from very small towns, like 200 people we're
Right,
talking.
right.
And so do you think that that had any like layering of, wow, I'm not an athlete, I don't play football, and here I'm in this huge school?
Um, I wanted to be in Kansas State because that's where everyone really, for the majority of people from where we are from, attended, right? So I see all my friends having fun, doing all these things, and then I'm at a smaller campus where the interactions with other people are limited, especially when you're going through athletics. But it definitely was a switch when you get to K State that um, I would say that I had some accomplishments in high school that, and I hate talking about high school accomplishments. I mean, my goodness, that was way in the past. But
They're
um,
great though. They matter. They're part of the story.
they are. I wish I could go back to my high school self and give them some advice. But people looked at me as someone that was successful even then, and to try to stay in that role um, in Manhattan, I just felt like pressure started to mount more and more. I wanted to appease everyone. I truly did.
Mm. Yeah, so that's, I think, a pressure that a lot of people, whether you're in college, whether you're trying to support your family, you have a job, you have all of these roles, and we're trying to appease and not taking a look at ourselves in the mirror.
Right.
And so going through like college, you now have the awareness, you can look back and be like, okay, that was a dark night. That was a dark night. Like,
Yeah.
is that when, was there alcohol involved at that point? Obviously, I mean, it's college,
Yeah.
but
Uh, you know, Alcohol was definitely a part of my life in college. That's the environment that you're in. There's always someone willing to drink. It wasn't necessarily a problem, though. I never used alcohol to escape, which would come into the future. I would use alcohol to go out and have fun with my friends and um, do things that shouldn't have been done sometimes. But it wasn't an avoidance. It wasn't escape a reality to the point where I was truly abusing it in college.
so talk about, you said there were like days or nights where in college,
Hmm.
now like you would just go internal. I mean, did you have anyone like knocking on the door like, "Hey man, what's happening?"
Yeah, no, I mean, my roommates, kind of became a joke, an ongoing joke. Oh, Corey's sick. They just knew I would tell them I'm sick. I just wouldn't stick my head out. I just need space. I just need to rest. And they were concerned about me, but after one time or two times, they're just like, okay, this is what he does. I mean, he's going to be, sick for 48 hours. And when I came back, I was at that time, then I was in the mindset where I could still jump in and kind of be my old self, if you would say, and they didn't really notice anything that was off. So eventually they just kind of accepted it, and I just moved on and didn't address it. And really, I didn't think I needed to. I had no idea that the things that I was doing was not normal. So
So now knowing what you know, to take a pause and offer if we have any youth out there watching. And because this is a very common thing where friends are like, he's sick, she's sick, oh, she's, and it really gets brushed aside. And
hmm
and these like college kids are growing through this all by themselves without the awareness of this is a mental
yeah.
health, like this is a mental illness. Do you have like anything that you would love to share with them in this moment of it's not a joke?
Yeah, no, I think that if you feel that way, I mean, sickness is, you should never feel the way that you don't value yourself. I mean, if you're not valuing yourself, and you're just keeping it all, bottled up, that's really the worst thing you could do. What I needed to do is I needed to express my feelings, but I didn't know that that wasn't normal. I mean, I want people to understand, if you're consistently having self-doubt, if you're consistently feeling that you don't belong, that you have the anxiety of talking to other people because of fear of judgment, those feelings are not normal. And it's best to find someone that you feel really comfortable with. I'm not saying go shout it from a mountaintop, but find someone that you're close, a circle that you can trust, maybe one person, and just start having that conversation. Say, I've been feeling like this, and just have that listening ear, because It might be that it is just a situational thing, or it might be a little bit more severe, to my case where it was major depressive disorder. But really understand that consistent thoughts like that are not normal. And whether it's going to someone that's a professional, whether it's talking to someone that you love the most, you just need to have that conversation, even if it's uncomfortable.
Or it is screaming it. Like, or it
It could
is,
be, yeah, yeah,
hello,
right,
like this is not normal. And like either way, and I think on the flip side, if you are hearing that from a loved one, what would you tell, like, how do you respond when you hear someone coming to you that you love or care about? This isn't normal. Like,
yeah.
bro.
That's probably even the one of the biggest questions that I've had that people have came to me with. And the biggest thing that I could say is a lot of the time when people are coming to you, they're hurting. They're being very vulnerable for a reason, and they're not coming to you for you to solve the problem right away. A lot of the time, they want validation. They want to know that someone's listening, that someone's not judging, and saying, "You know what? I hear what you're saying, and that sucks." Don't If someone's coming to you, don't try to jump into controlling the situation right away. Be very open, listen, ask questions, but you don't have to be the one-stop shop for all the answers. That's not what they're coming to you for.
Ugh, I love that. Yeah. So you graduate
Hmm.
from K-State, and now what's the next chapter look like for you?
Yeah, so I graduated from Kansas State and I went to Kansas City. I met my wife in K-State. She's from Kansas City, so made the journey there into education. I graduated with elementary education background and started substitute teaching, going around KC Metro, landed a job there, was engaged very shortly after college, and kind of the same thing as to college that, I would do my job. I would go out with friends on the weekend, with my wife on the weekend, but there'd still be a few days where, I would be sick from work, and what that was is just laying in bed again, not think a whole lot of it. It hadn't impacted work at all, hadn't impacted a whole lot of other things, but um, shortly after life progressed, kids, as you mentioned, principal promotion at the age of 28, the stressors start to come. I really realized that I did not have an answer to cope when I had issues.
So that's a big undertaking. Like 28 years old, a principal of how many like kids?
Yeah,
Or was it?
550 kids. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you and your wife is Lauren, right?
Yep.
You have two boys?
I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. So my second child was being born as I got into administration at the end of my first admin experience. So it was a lot to take on. Definitely didn't have parenting mastered by that time. It definitely did not have all the answers in administration. So you're learning so much at such a fast pace. And, when you're an elementary principal, you are the last stop. So you're expected to have the answers, and whether you have them or not, you have to find them out. And, unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that comes across your desk isn't the raw positive stuff, right? It's when it becomes a problem or something that needs fixed. So, it was just a lot to take in. And I didn't always deal with it the best that I could have to keep myself mentally healthy.
And so this kind of goes back to what you said, like in college, appeasing everyone. You're
Right.
stepping into this role with
Hmm.
a lot on your shoulders at 28. And so, I mean, did you have, at that time, you didn't have any practices of mindfulness, obviously,
Yeah.
like it was day in, day out, doing the routine. What called you? Like, what called you to go into that industry, teaching and leading the youth?
Yeah. So my mom was my fifth grade teacher, and she's been in education her whole life. She's still a school psych. And, my freshman year of college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then it was actually my mom, and shout out to Eric Farwell. He was my roommate, and he was going into education. He's a great teacher in Riley County now. And I was like, you know what? I think that I'd be a good fit for education. I think that I'd really like that. And, it just kind of took off from there.
Oh, that's amazing. Shout out to Eric. We hope you're well.
Yeah.
Um, so like, I mean, that's just such a big responsibility. I'm trying to wrap my head around that many kids and like knowing your story and your upbringing. And now like this is on your table. I mean, what were some of the most challenging things that did come on your desk? Was it home life? Was it, you know?
Yeah. I think that home life and the difficulties that families were having was what weighed on me the most. I mean, there's always a thousand different issues, but we lived in a very diverse area, the school anyway, and we had 65% of our kids were on free and reduced lunch. And I'd go on to home visits, or I would go into apartments and uh, just see what little families had and how they're just barely getting by. And kids in my office that had, you know, been acted out in ways in the classroom, but then when you find the underlying reason of they're not going home to a parent, they're going home to an empty house because mom or dad's working the two jobs, and they don't know if they're going to have enough food to make it past the weekend. Things like that tug on your heartstring, and it makes it very difficult. And then you compile that with other issues that go on. But when I go home each and every night, not worried about my family, but worried about little Johnny or little Susie, what's their life like right now? And just concerned until I see their smiling face the next day. That gets very, very hard on a person's emotion.
Yeah. So was this about the time? I mean, how far after you get this promotion and you're living this life day in and day out, which I'm sure it's like the door that just keeps, it's like not a new story, it's just a different face.
Right.
So how long was that until then you realized like I'm drinking like every night, or then
Yeah.
alcohol became a lot more frequent?
Yeah. Believe it or not, alcohol didn't come into the situation as early as you would expect. I would say that it was probably the last 2 years of being a leader that alcohol truly was the way that I coped with things. Um, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't coping with unhealthy ways otherwise. It might be where, I'm not getting the exercise I need. I'm going home, I'm sitting there, I'm maybe overeating, or I'm shutting down from my family. Um, Many things that impacted me emotionally, just rather than alcohol. But it was about 2 years, my last 2 years, where alcohol became the only thing that I knew how to escape if I did have a rough situation.
So I love that you bring that up because it's really just wellness as a whole.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily need or even need to be alcohol or any kind of substance. It's like you're just not paying attention to yourself.
Uh-huh.
I mean, was there at any time in the 6 years, am I doing my math right, that, anyone was like, hey, where it was like the knock on the door, like in college, this isn't like I'm trying to
Yeah.
recognize like what's going on, or they're calling it like Cory's sick again.
Yeah. Uh, the ironic thing is, as a leader of the building, like my number one thing to preach was you need to take care of yourself first. You need to be involved at home. And I could give advice like that all the time. I would never take it myself. And a lot of the time, the staff would throw it back at me and saying, well, hey, you need to take care of yourself too. But my ego's telling me I've got too much stuff to do. I need to help out all these families. I need to make sure that my staff has everything they need. I need to make sure the community, I'm looking and I'm just taking that advice and, just kind of like, yeah, that advice is for you. That's not for me. So for, 6 years, I dished it out, but I never truly looked inward and said, okay, well, you need to live what you preach. And it made it very hard. So there was concern there, but there's no one that truly sat me down and said, Cory, you've got to slow down. You've got to take care of yourself. But there were people that would come in and talk to me and make sure that I was okay. I would just lie to them. I would tell them that I was fine, and I wasn't.
Um, it's a beautiful thing that we preach that which we most need to learn.
Yeah,
You're going to be in this beautiful space of like preaching what
yeah,
you had to learn the really, really hard way. So take us to the nitty gritty. Like, what was the frying pan? I mean, so you said the last 2 years, you're like turning to alcohol.
Mhm.
And I love that with you, I can say 2x4 because you know what a 2x4 is like across the face.
That's
I'm
right.
like, when you're from Kansas, you know this lingo.
That's right.
So, 2 years of coping,
Hmm.
and then the alcohol became a little more frequent.
Yeah. So really the turning point for alcohol was my brother, my younger brother was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and he called me one night, and it just hit me like nothing else had hit me before. The cancer word is very scary. He's in full remission. He's had another kid now, but I just didn't know anything about it, and I just I fell apart for a while. Um, Lauren had finally came to me and said, "I think you have a bigger issue than just situational things. I think that you might. There's more to the story." That's when I became diagnosed with depression,
So you
and
went, did you see a doctor then at
I
that
did.
point in time?
Yeah, I saw a doctor, started medication, and the biggest thing, Jill, was I didn't want to believe it myself. I was at the point where I was in denial. So I'd stop taking medication. I would eventually, they got me to agree to go see a therapist. I'd skip my therapy appointment, say I would go, because again, it's going back to I don't want anyone to judge me. I don't want anyone to think that I can't handle my job. I was terrified of a stigma that would be placed on me. So I've eliminated all these things: medication, therapy, talking to people. So that's when my only friend that I saw was the bottle. And that would be, uh, it started off maybe just the weekends, or maybe one night during the week, and it would be after the kids and Lauren went to bed. I'd have a couple glasses so I could just get my mind off of things and relax. And then the last 2 years, it progressively got worse. Never to the point where I would drink in the morning or drink during the day or anything of that sort. But it was just the way that it was my excuse to have a drink was to escape, and it was not okay. In the last year, um, it was probably, and I should say the last year, probably the last 4 months from October 2018 to January 2019 when I resigned, was probably 4 nights a week, or counting weekends. So, definitely not healthy. And you're depressed and you're putting a depressant in your body to mask that. You want to talk about an ugly cycle that I fell into. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
what people forget, is that alcohol is a depressant. If
yeah,
you're going to look on the substance line of like, it's a depressant. So when you're already in a depressed state and then you're intaking and it stays in your bloodstream for a
yeah.
while, it's a continuous dark hole, dark hole, dark hole. And so what was when was the day then?
January
Talk
25th is
about the day. Let's talk
the
about
day.
the
Let's get
day.
to it. My day that I'll never forget, unfortunately. So January 25th is a Friday. I'm actually at a conference for my school, about an hour outside of Kansas City. I've been having some issues at this point with my family. And if you recall, I said my family and I were great growing up. We continued to be until I just got in this funk where I didn't think anyone appreciated me. So I'm snapping at my parents, and they happen to be coming into Kansas City this weekend. Well, I don't necessarily want to see them. I get back into town at noon on Friday. I take the afternoon off. I have a therapy appointment. Um, I know what we're going to talk about at therapy. Don't want to talk about it. So I go and I get two little shooter vodka bottles before I even go. Um, sure enough, we go and we talk about what I didn't want to talk about. I look at my watch when I get out. My parents are probably about 2 hours out. So I get on my phone and I Google the nearest liquor store. And from there, the next thing you know, I am at a stoplight and there's someone outside of their car taking pictures of my license plate, taking pictures of me. That's not a good sign, telling me to pull over. Um, and it's like I've got those two, you always see the angel and the devil on your shoulder, right? And you think that you're going to lose everything. I was just terrified, don't know what I'm going to do. And the little guy and to the right, told me to keep on driving. That's exactly what I did. And I was pulled over. Cops were waiting for me at my house. That's where I was cited with the DUI and a hit and run. And the next thing you know, I'm handcuffed to a bench in the Shawnee Mission Police Station for 4 hours. And you want to talk about a come to Jesus moment of where has your life gone? That was just the start of it. Because the next 4 days I went to Johnson County detox for 3 days, and there's no communication with anyone. I'm supposed to be talking, ironically, at a church that Sunday. I'm supposed to prepare all this information for school as I get back, and reality is I don't know if I'm going back to school. So I had to get a hold of my parents, and I'm just bawling at this point on the phone from Johnson County Detox and telling them that at this point in time, I finally realized that I've got so many issues in my life that I can't manage it. I've gone from this person that I view myself as on the, too high of a pedestal, to wanting to do everything right and wanting to be that role model for everyone, to someone that I am ashamed of and don't want anyone to see. So I told my parents I need them to find me a place to go. I don't want it just to be alcohol. I don't want it just to be mental health. I want it to be both. And that was in Newton, Kansas. And I went there for 18 days. It's where I found God again. I'd pushed him away for the longest time. And that's where I truly started to realize that I've got some flaws. They don't have to define me, but they have at this point. And I need to open up. I need to be vulnerable, and I need to accept the help that I need to manage life. And if people in my life can't accept that, then maybe they don't need to be in my circle. And what I hadn't mentioned is my story went national. It was all over the news as, an elementary principal with a hit and run, DUI. I had a lot of bridges to repair, and I put my family through a lot. And that's kind of the come to Jesus moment that it took. I had said that at the moment it was the worst time of my life, but it's truly, looking back now, it's what saved my life. And it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, to be honest.
Spirit works in really magical ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not for the always the best in the moment. So talk about that moment a little more, of your handcuffed sitting on a bench. And, it's also like, you've mentioned that your ego is coming into play. Well, your ego, it sounds like, had been running the last 2 years prior to this happening with lying. You're not going to therapy, but you're saying you're going to therapy. You're getting off your medication, and without telling anyone, it sounded like, without your doctor or anything, like just complete egotistical. I've got this. I'm a man. I have my family. I'm a principal.
Yeah.
To then you're handcuffed on a bench.
Yeah. And I think that, when I say I go back and talk to my high school self, I think it started there, my ego. I think I need to be brought down to earth back in high school. And I wish I would have been. And it just kind of started there with, I liked the success that I saw. I liked how people looked at me. And it just continued to build and build and build. And with more success, I felt like I had more reason to puff my chest out. And just what an awful thing to do. So then I wanted to build my image up as this person that's got his head on straight. This is the person you need to look toward, when in reality, I couldn't do that. So you're right. I'm lying, and I'm lying to everyone. I'm lying to my wife. I'm lying to my parents. I'm lying to myself nonstop. And part of the reason that I started the journey and the mission of Grace in Your Corner is, if I had someone take me by the hand, like I'm trying to spread the word and do for others, I'm not sure that my story would end the way it did, in handcuffs. And I chuckled about handcuffs because to this day, still, if I don't try to relieve it with laughter, it brings about sadness and tears, because who would
And
have ever thought?
those are okay too. I think
Yeah,
that's a piece, and that's why I'm so honestly grateful to talk with you as a man. Like, that's okay to cry. It's
yeah,
okay to have these other feelings. It's okay to not be dominated by ego and this, like, I'm a man and I got it all under control. So I think that's a beautiful space that you get to offer now in Grace in Your Corner. Like,
yeah.
I cry sometimes.
And you don't see that. And I think you would know. Back in Nemaha County, we don't see many male figures showing raw emotion. When you think of a man's emotion, you think of anger, you think of boastfulness, you think of pride. Um,
I'll see you on the football field.
yeah, yeah.
I'll
Let's go
see
to the
you
gridiron. Let's go to the
playing
basketball court.
basketball. I
Right.
mean, I know. It's yeah.
And I had said to a few people, and I even wrote about this, that I've seen my dad cry twice in my life. And the first time was when we buried his father. And the second time is when he's dropping his 34-year-old off at rehab, not knowing which version he's going to get when he comes back. You want to talk about a tough encounter, is hugging your dad, just full of raw emotion as he drops you off in rehab. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm very emotional, and I'm not afraid to let people know that that's okay. I think being a male added to the fire too, being a leader of a building. All these things were stacking up against me, and I wish I just would have said time out and just said, this is who I am, and just explained it to everyone instead of trying to be someone else, saying, I have bad days. I show emotion. I'm not always right. I need assistance. If I would, because what I've come to find is that there's not near as much judgment as I thought there would be. There's more people with support and open hands. But that's not what society is telling us. And because we don't see that, everyone's so scared to step outside of the norm, that I think we don't get what we truly
Well,
deserve.
it's a lot of stories too, right? It's stories that have been created since we were 6 years old, wherever our upbringing is, the stories of our family, like that's what it creates who we are today. So it's just there's not a lot of opportunity unless you consciously take it in your own hands, your journey, and be like, well, I get to self-help myself here, I get to self-parent myself here, and like all
Mhm.
of these nuggets. So what was it like? You get dropped off 18 days.
It's rough. And I'll be honest with you, Lauren and I's relationship at this point, not good. Um, I talked to her for 2 minutes when I was in detox, and hadn't really talked to her again, even being dropped off. And when you're at rehab, you are just cut out of society. There is TV, but you don't have your cell phone. You don't have access to the internet. You get 3 10-minute phone calls every week, so have to be very careful on what you're using with those. And um, Lauren and I were to the point where one of those phone calls would be home. It was just my parents, honestly. Um, so I'm sitting there. I'm worried about my job, my community, what's going to come across. And again, it's the ego thing, like worried about all these other things when someone need to knock me upside the head and say, you need to look at yourself. And eventually I did that. I called my dad and said, I don't care what they're going to do. I don't know if I'm going to lose my job, if they're going to fire me. I don't know. But I can't sit here and think about it anymore because I'm just wasting time that I need to fix myself. So I had him call HR and tell them that I'd openly resign before anything had been determined. And then I just kind of locked in and focused on myself. They have a very detailed schedule where there's a lot of information, a lot of education in the morning, a lot of coping in the afternoon, self-monitoring skills, things of that. And then there's also some downtime. And during the downtime, I think I read 6 books, all faith-based, during those 18 days. Uh, so a lot of self-searching, and you know, truly rehab's the easy part because you are locked away from society with other people that are dealing with the same thing. It's a sense of comfort, but once those doors open back up and you go back to where everyone's whispering about, hey, where's Cory been for 18 days? Or if they watch the news, hey, I know where Cory's at. Um, Going back, and it was scary to go back to Kansas City and address all of that and start to focus on the bridges that have been burnt, starting number one with my wife and my family. So
Yeah, that's that it takes incredible courage. So I really want to applaud you for this mission that you're on, because calling your dad and telling, hey, I have to resign, it sounds like that was like your first yes
hmm
to Cory
yeah,
in years.
yeah,
And so you gave yourself the yes, the permission to then, like, I get to heal, and the courage to 18 days. And then you step back into this space of not the confines of this comfort. And that had to be an incredible, like, toughness and love and spiritual, like, coming together with your wife to get back to a place of, why you guys got married in the first place.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, it wasn't just a DUI or being on the news in a negative light that you know provided the distance between her and I. It's how I'd ignored myself and really ignored the family for 2 years because I wasn't taking care of myself. So while it might look like just a short snippet of this action, it's actually 2 years of actions of not taking care of myself and not giving them the support that they need.
Well, it's probably more than that, right?
Well,
Like, it
yeah, yeah.
sounds
I
like
mean,
it's
I'm
been
probably being
going.
generous to myself.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been going on since college, and then you're just like getting through it. So,
Right.
yeah, it's just the snowball effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't have made it through without her. And things got better. And I am glad to say, excuse me, glad to say that her and I are as strong as we were when we said our vows 10 years ago. I think you're right. Saying yes to me at rehab, and actually, I haven't told anyone this, but most of the time in rehab, it's maximum 2 weeks the insurance will cover. Uh, I was prepared to pay for more time out of my own pocket just to stay there longer, and it's not cheap. Um, Fortunately, my insurance did give me the extra 4 days that I wanted, but I was continuing to say yes to me, saying, I don't think I'm quite ready yet. I need a little bit more time to, now that I have these skills, now I need to start planning towards my adjustment back to Kansas City and things that I need to do. Because I really was um, scared, and I knew if I went back to Kansas City without a detailed plan of how I could handle everything, that I might just fall back in the same cycle. So I had a very thorough plan of places I was going to go, therapists, psychiatrists, all this stuff aligned before I even stepped foot out of the facility in Newton.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
The one yes is like a ripple effect of all of these opportunities that you would have not seen if you would have kept in ego state, right? Of like
Yeah.
lying, not taking the medication. And so that leads you, like, you're back in Kansas City, you're back in your home, and now, I mean, you're still seeing there. Like, what's your day to day, week
Yeah.
to week?
Yeah. So unemployed for a long time. I am working again. So that is a plus, right? I've joined the real estate field. Several different reasons. The first reason for real estate was it's just another opportunity to help people, um, helping them make one of the biggest decisions financially that they'll make, uh, and busting my tail in a service way. The second part of real estate is you do work a lot more hours than people think you do, but it is flexible. Um, I haven't been able to be present at my kids' events in school. I mean, I've done hundreds of school events and probably only 4 or 5 of my son, and he's in second grade now. So it's going to allow me to be a little bit more present in their life, and it's going to allow me to continue to do my work with Grace in Your Corner. And that wasn't something I wanted to do just for 3 months while I was unemployed. It's something that I want to continue to do. Um, but going back to your question, when I got back, I mean, I was going to meetings, whether it's a therapist, support group, peer group, you name it, and I was going a lot. Like, that was my full-time job. I would go to 2 or 3 peer groups a day, therapy once a week, psychiatrist not as frequent, but probably once every 2 weeks. Then faded off to once a month, and now I'm at once every 3 months. Um, but I continue to have those things in place. Number one, the biggest thing is just connection with people, being vulnerable and honest, and continuing to tell my story, listening to other people's stories. That's probably what gives me the most benefit. along with taking medication consistently. I have backed off of the amount of meetings I go to now, but I haven't just quit completely. And I think that that's important, that I still have a plan I want to follow. I'm just not quite as intense as I used to be at 3 a day. I mean, that's just not sustainable when you're trying to raise your kids and continue on with a career.
But
But
necessary.
it's
Necessary in the
necessary,
space
and
that you're in. Yeah.
it's definitely on my non-negotiable list of things that need to be done. Um, so, and the thing is, I have people holding me accountable too. Lauren, my parents, some of my closest friends, and they'll ask me about it. They're not afraid to ask about um, what I say. I used to have a lot of fluff conversations with not a lot of detail. Now we have some true, genuine conversations, and they'll say, "Hey, you still going to your therapist?" Absolutely. Here's what we're talking about. Or still taking your medication? You bet, twice a day. I mean, so just
Well, it's kind of like how when we first got on, we're like, how are you? It's like asking those questions that someone's going to be like, I'm good, I'm great. It's
yeah,
the deeper core of no, really.
yeah. And I mean, Jill, honestly, those are the conversations I wouldn't just have with friends. Those are conversations I'd have with family too.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, it was like a broken record. How are you? Whether we jump into sports, we talk sports, and there's nothing wrong with conversations like that. But at some point in time, if you really want to advance in relationships, you have to have meaningful conversation about life and even faith. Man, I never talked about faith with other people, and quite frequently now. I mean, I'm not ashamed of it. I feel like I always try to find a balance, being the leader of a building with my personal opinion and not push things on each other. But it feels wonderful now to put anything out on social media that I want to praise God as much as I want to, and not worry about it, because uh, that's how I feel, and that's what gets me through life.
So it sounds like you have a really good community, and I enjoy that you touched on that, because community, tribe, family, even if it's not blood relative family, like that's
Mhm.
really important. I mean, what would you say to someone that's listening to this and is like, yeah, I'm feeling like this, I don't have connection? I mean, how do you go about finding community?
Yeah, and that is a great point, because not everyone does have that. And it depends on where you're at too. Like in a Kansas City environment, there are peer groups all over the place that you can find. If you have access to the internet, you can find peer groups with people that are dealing with the similar issues.
What do you search? Like, what's going to be the search?
Depends on what you need. If you're looking for something with addiction, there's similar. I mean, you name it. There's all sorts of things for addiction, depression, mental health. I would always look through faith-based organizations. A lot of churches around here have run care nights. My church has a Thursday night care night where they have addiction, they have mental health, they have finance. I mean, you name it. So a lot of churches run organizations like that. Um, Otherwise, I mean, you can always call professional help too, and they probably have a list of resources for you. The issue that I still struggle with is I talk to a lot of people in Nemaha County, very rural community, and some of them, they struggle because if they want to go to a therapist, they have to drive 45 minutes. I wouldn't drive 5 minutes when I was in Kansas City, and people. So I think it's a little bit harder in more rural areas. I don't have the answers for everyone, but there's even online therapists. I've tried that before, like just communicating like you and I are.
Yeah, to that point, I want to say there are absolutely psychologytoday.com is a great
Mhm.
resource, and you can go on and it's a virtual therapy session using video or phone. And so there's a lot of ways now that are tech
Mhm.
friendly for, if you are in a rural place. And that also brings up, you're not probably going to want to go to a therapist that's local either.
Right.
You're going to see the person every day.
Yep.
So there, just reach out. There's plenty of resources in this lovely tech world that we live in.
Yeah.
Uh, so to wrap things up, I always like to ask a question, like kind of futuristic.
Mhm.
If you see like 3 years from now with Grace in your corner, I mean, what is your like dream vision for those folks that are finding themselves in college and then past college? Like, in this repetitive web of
Yeah.
like dark nights.
I want to get up. So my goal is to be a public speaker, and I want to go around and share not only my story, but stories I've encountered and people and things that have happened. I mean, not sharing other people's stories, but just kind of experiences and awareness and educate people. Um, I'd like to do that as much as possible, not just at a local church. I actually am going to be speaking at K-State later on this year to younger people, and I think that that's important. Um, because I want to reach the people that are being impacted directly, but I also, as you and I talked about family, often family and loved ones are impacted even more because they can't control it, they can't cure it, and at times they feel like they caused it, which is so far from the truth that they don't know how to handle and help themselves too. So I would like Grace in your corner to continue to expand um, to where I am speaking more in front of people, but I also want it to be a place where, like you said, oh, I don't really know anyone. Where can I connect with? Well, I'd love people to be able to go to the website and connect with other people that are struggling and go from there. Because I tell people I'm not a professional. I'm not licensed. So I would always tell people to seek professional help, but I can help connect others. And again, I think connection is a big part of the powerful piece that can help cure. So.
Beautiful. And if someone's watching and they are like finding themselves in a pattern that you're saying, what's the advice? Like what would you tell high school Cory?
Yeah. Well, I tell high school Cory to to be a little bit more humble, number one. But I would say for those watching, I mean, it's easy. And so let me preface it. I hate when people come to someone that's depressed and tell them, think of all that you have to live for. Think of this and that. That's one of the worst ways to approach someone that's
It's
depressed.
not rainbows and butterflies.
No, I mean, you know what? If they could snap their fingers and say, wow, this is a great life, they would do that, right? Um, but I would just think about, what is the main reason? Like, what does truly bring you joy when you're feeling at the top of your life? What does bring you joy, and how do you get there? What was going on in your life when that happened? And the affirmations and the trust in God, I believe that you are worth it. I mean, you are so worth it. And I think that my morning routine now is I wake up, I look a little bit of scripture, a little bit of self affirmation, just to continue to allow yourself to see the value of life. Because it's easy to get sucked in when you're in that dark hole. It's hard to come out. But I would tell people that people want to be associated with you. That judgment in your head, it's there, but you have to take that leap of faith. You have to start by being vulnerable, and it might be with one person, it might be with 10. Find someone that you can be vulnerable with, that you can have a discussion, and then go from there. Again, it like you and I said, it might be 25 people, it might be a room of 100 at a family reunion, or it might just be one person. But you have to be in a group that you truly trust and that you can just be authentic and let them know how you're feeling.
Yeah. Amazing. Cory, thank you so much for your story. And all of his contact information will be below in the notes if you want to reach out. If you're in a space of not feeling like something's right, please reach out. Grace in your corner. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you, Cory.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate it.